Association, backbone of America. All right, so some of you get that reference. It's a bit made in jest. You ever seen The Campaign? The movie The Campaign with Will Ferrell? You should watch all Will Ferrell movies, they're pretty funny. But you should definitely watch The Campaign. And it starts out, it's a parody of all things campaigning. If you haven't noticed, we're in campaign season. You're probably seeing my face across your TV or your social media or whatever it is. And if you've managed to ignore all my ads, then good on you. It's impressive. Because we're trying to get to you everywhere. But I just love that movie because in the initial part of the movie, it's Will Ferrell. He plays the part of a politician. He's going to each and every group. And he's like, North Houston Association, you are the backbone of America. Filipino tilt-a-world workers of America, you're the backbone of America. And it's a parody, of course. But what's funny is I spoke at an event not too long ago, and I played that clip, and then I showed a bunch of Elizabeth Warren's tweets, where she says to every possible identity group that you can think of, you are the backbone of America. It's ridiculous. Politicians really do play into the parodies of themselves. So I try not to. I try to do my best not to. So we'll have some fun today. I'll give you an update on what we've been working on, what I think matters to you as folks who are in business and trying to keep our economy going. And as I said before, I do like to do questions, keep it interesting, because otherwise you'll just start staring at your phones or your meals. And, that's boring. So, let's start with some current events. I think we should be happy that our Supreme Court is in good hands. Amy Coney Barrett is, I think, a hero in a very true sense. And, I don't mean that as far as somebody who saved someone else from a burning building, right? That's also heroic, of course. But I think in America, and you mentioned my book, which I'm proud to thank you for doing that, sir, and I appreciate the plug. One of the chapters in that book is called "Who is Your Hero?" And I talk about how America has flipped this idea of heroism on its head, and we've instead begun to elevate heroic virtues that are not heroic at all. We've started to elevate victimhood. Right? Whoever can talk the loudest about their oppression, whoever can scream the loudest about what's been done wrong to them, they're lionized. This is interesting. If you want proof of that, let me bring back my friend Elizabeth Warren. She brings a lot of good examples to the table. Why would she lie? Why would she lie in two different cases about being part of a victim class? She lied about being Native American, she lied about being fired when she was pregnant. None of these things were true. And yet she lied about it. But what's the point of the lie? That's the strange part, actually. Not the opportunism, but the strange part is that she thought it would be beneficial. Why would she do that? And it's because of our American culture. It's because of this trend in our culture where it says you should be thought of as a victim. This is a problem. Because victimhood goes nowhere. There's nothing on the other side of victimhood except removal of agency. It's disempowerment. If you're a victim, then you're always waiting for somebody else to save you. That's not good. You'll never succeed that way. It might feel good. A warm blanket of self-pity often does, but it doesn't do any good. And this is important. This is important for your personal life. This is important for the sustainability of a society, especially one like America, where we deem it important, or at least we used to compete, to strive, to engage in personal responsibility, to innovate, to build out your business, to work hard, and to be rewarded for that hard work. These are heroic attributes. To overcome adversity is an heroic attribute, or at least we used to think of it as such. This has started to change. It worries me a great deal about the future of our country. There's all the bad policies that you might hear about, all the bad policies that hurt your businesses. They always stem from a cultural movement. Cultural movements are probably more important. All policy is downstream of the political environment, and the politics is downstream of the culture. So Amy Coney Barrett, to me, embodies those heroic attributes that we should look up to. In her case, I think the steadfast ability to answer dumb questions for 12 hours on end, that's pretty heroic. The intelligence, the grace with which she does it, the understanding of the law, the understanding of her profession. It's so, this shouldn't be so unique, but it appears to me that it might be. And I'm just still proud that America is producing such exceptional people. And exceptional people that I think are standing for the right things. This is important. This conversation around the role of the judiciary is vastly important, and it does affect you. I know this is largely a business crowd, and we'll get to some economics and some energy issues soon. But the judiciary is important because at a certain point in time, well, you will run into the courts. There's a lot of trial lawyers looking to sue you guys in case somebody gets sick with coronavirus. We're trying to stop that in Congress and give you some liability protection. You will come in contact with the courts at some point. And I would hope that you would expect that court or that judge would simply follow the law. Would simply follow the law. Would not have an outcome in mind as you come before that judge, but would simply follow the law within those given parameters and make judgments accordingly. That's what we should expect of our judiciary. It's a procedure. It's a process. And if you undermine the process itself because you like a desired outcome, well, then the entire system falls apart. How can we trust it? But this is the philosophical difference, unfortunately, between the left and the right. Where, if you notice that the critics of Amy Coney Barrett talk about what she might consider, what she might believe in. It doesn't matter what she believes in. The only thing that matters is that she follows the law as written. There's this notion out there that originalism is a defunct ideology. That originalism is racist, is oppressive. These are the words that I've heard. But something of the sort. It's simply an adherence to a process. It's a really important adherence to a process. And if you throw that away, then you have chaos. You can't have chaos in the one branch of government that is not meant to decide outcomes, but meant to decide procedures, and meant to decide what sticks to the law and what does not. And the fact that Amy Coney Barrett, I think, answered those questions so perfectly is why we can believe that our Supreme Court will be in good hands. This election, and I know you guys probably hear politicians speak and everybody says, well, okay, this election is the big one, this one matters more than most. You know, on paper, this one really does. It will really affect you. We have vastly different policies that are at stake here. It seems all but guaranteed that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will be repealed if we go in one direction. That means all your taxes get raised. All your business taxes get raised. Your minimum wage probably goes up to $15 an hour. It strikes me as odd that even though the economic reality of the minimum wage debate is so solidified at this point that we're even still debating it. But we are. How, I don't know. How people don't understand that the cost of living in New York is different than Houston and different than 30 minutes outside of Houston, and that you might need different minimum wages for each. How people still don't understand that, I don't know. Or how people don't understand that the budget of your business doesn't change just because we decide that a minimum wage changes. Right? You're just going to hire less people or cut hours. Even Bernie Sanders knows this because his campaign did it. And yet they still advocate for this. There's this other strange notion that people who have been making the same minimum wage, who were making minimum wage in 2009, are still making the minimum wage in 2020. I saw this tweet about this today, right? As somebody trying to make the case for why the minimum wage must be changed, because it was the same as in 2009, but the top 400 richest people got richer since 2009. Here's what they don't tell you. The top 400 people are different than they were in 2009. And the people making a minimum wage in 2009 are different than the ones making a minimum wage in 2020. You all know this because you run businesses. You understand that the entire point of an entry-level wage is to get people into the labor market so that they can put something on their resume and move up. Nobody stays in that position. And all the data suggests this is true, right? A lot of critics will like to say, well, in the last 40 years, the bottom quintile of earners has remained the same. The same people are not in that category. They move up. In fact, they move up way faster than any other quintile of earners. When you have pro-growth policies, when you have deregulation and lower taxes, you get higher wage growth amongst the bottom earners. And that's been proven in the last 3 years. When we look at the data, the one measurement that has skyrocketed since 2016 has been the bottom quintile of earners. Their wage growth skyrocketed faster than any other quintile of earners. Because this stuff actually works. This election is really about doing things for our economy and restoring our way of life via policies that actually work. Letting you grow your business, letting you hire who you want to hire, and actually getting back on your feet. And also not shutting you down. Okay, that's also a pretty big deal, as it turns out. Can we give them applause for no more shutdowns, please? Once more. Not like Jeb Bush, please clap. Okay. No, this stuff matters. It matters for our future, it matters for our kids' future, it matters for your business's future. Texas is especially on the chopping block here because we're having conversations at a national level about destroying the oil and gas industry. Okay. This is dumb. Not just because we lose about 250,000 jobs in Houston. I think it's probably more. Those are the ones directly related to oil and gas. But as it turns out, those are also customers. Those are also customers with money that partake in our restaurants and all sorts of other businesses here in Houston. So you can imagine a lot of job loss if we just take a hammer to our oil and gas industry. So it's bad for that. Everybody knows that. Right, but the radical environmentalists don't care. They say, well, we'll just transition them to a nice clean energy job because that's just how it works, right? Of course not. But here's the thing. It's also bad for the environment. And I do care about the environment. I just happen to be a rational environmentalist, not a radical environmentalist. Here's why it's bad for the environment. When you destroy American energy independence, you don't stop energy demand. It turns out that the world still needs energy, and in fact, by any estimation, we're going to need about 25 to 30% more energy over the next 30 years worldwide. Because as it turns out, poor people around the world, they like not being poor. Okay? So they need energy to do that. They want to create their industries. They want to get themselves out of poverty. The same is true in America, by the way. We still need energy. And our lower income folks here in America don't like paying extra prices for their electricity, like they do in California, where electricity rates have grown 6 times faster than the rest of the country. And for all that extra money, they get their own blackouts, which is like, what a great deal. These things don't work. They feel good. They feel really good to say. It feels really good to virtue signal about this stuff. It doesn't work. That's the problem. It doesn't work and it has bad outcomes. That's why everybody's fleeing from California. That's why to get a U-Haul from Los Angeles to Houston is 4 times more expensive than to get a U-Haul from Houston to Los Angeles. Nobody's going to Los Angeles. All right, despite the nice weather. Maybe San Diego. San Diego's nice. I have like a soft spot in my heart for San Diego. We lived there for 10 years. It's where I was in the SEAL teams. LA is not that way. And unfortunately, a lot of small businesses are even leaving the nice places like San Diego. They just cannot afford it. It just doesn't work. There's no point to paying all those high taxes. Their environment is getting worse because they have these massive forest fires because they don't put any money into forest management. Here in Texas, by the way, we have primarily private land ownership, which means that it's much easier to put out fires, it's much easier to engage in land management. These are simple truths. They don't feel good. It feels a lot better to say, let's purchase up all the land and leave it alone because of Mother Nature. It feels good to say that. It's not true. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for the environment when you mow down acres and acres of land to build those solar and wind panels too. Right? What do you get out of that? Rolling blackouts, higher electricity prices, and a worse environment. So if you destroy the oil and gas industry in the United States, who's going to take up that energy demand? It's going to be Russia, it's going to be Iran, it's going to be Saudi Arabia. Well, it turns out on a life cycle basis, Russian natural gas is 47% more carbon emissions than U.S. natural gas. And that's just the natural gas that they export right next door to Europe. Imagine how much more emissions it is when they're putting it on a ship all the way to Boston because Bostonians and Massachusetts and New Yorkers they don't want to build pipelines to get Texas natural gas. The attack on the pipeline industry is an attack on the environment, fundamentally. Because if you can't get it into a pipeline and into an export terminal and ship cleaner natural gas to dirty coal-burning countries like China and India, you're getting higher global emissions, and we've got to flare that stuff out in West Texas so it has more global emissions. It doesn't make any sense. We should be propping up our energy sector. Better jobs, better environment, lower emissions. This is just true. This is just statistically true. And we should also be not... The funny thing about the Green New Deal is it also wants to eliminate nuclear energy. I always laugh at the people who are concerned about carbon emissions. I say, wouldn't it be crazy if we found this rock and then we just blew it up and it created clean energy for like 25 years? Wouldn't that be amazing? Oh yeah, that technology's been around for like 60, 70 years. It's called nuclear energy. You know, there's ways to invest to actually clean up the environment. But the Green New Dealers have no idea what that looks like. Because it's really not about the environment for them. In fact, if you read the Green New Deal, it's mostly about taking over your businesses, paying people who don't want to work, and destroying airplanes, because who knows? It's about a socialist takeover of the economy. And I don't know why this utopianism exists. This gets to a deeper discussion about the cultural trends in America and where they're going. And I think these cultural divisions have been in the human race forever. They're present in every country throughout history, right? It's a fundamental disagreement on what the role of government is. It's a fundamental disagreement on how much you can and should control human beings and human nature. And this is going to be a disagreement forever. Western Enlightenment, the American Enlightenment, the American founding was founded on this notion that we have a sense of humility about what government can truly accomplish. A sense of humility about how much we should control people's behaviors and actions. What we should do is provide people the maximum amount of freedom, designate in our Constitution that there are inalienable rights that cannot be infringed upon, no matter what, that the rights of the minority must be protected, that you can't just beat the 49% over the head because you won 51% majority. These are really important concepts. We're threatening to throw them away in this election. Threatening to centralize power in Washington, remove the filibuster, remove the Electoral College, add senators to the Senate in Washington, D.C., making it a state, hack the Supreme Court. That's the new big one today. It's really not new. But what does that really boil down to? They're attacking the foundations of a republic. The republic was created to protect the rights of the individual. If you don't do that, you end up with some kind of mob democracy. And that's not unifying. Just because everybody has to live under the same rules, the exact same policies, some people say that's unifying, some people say that's democracy. No, it's divisive. It means 51% of the majority telling the other 49% what to do, even if they're across the country from them. It's not unifying. It's a disaster. That's what's at stake here, right? The essence of why we govern is at stake here. And I believe we govern simply to protect your inalienable rights. I believe we govern to provide a structure, a set of incentives that do its best to stop you from infringing on your neighbor's rights. It's not just government that's not supposed to infringe on your rights. Government's supposed to protect you from others infringing on your rights. These are very basic purposes for why government exists. We don't teach this stuff in our civics classes anymore, so we go to the voting booth based on what politician promised us the most stuff. I don't know if any democracy will ever figure out how to deal with this problem where the population can simply vote itself for more things with taxpayer money. It's especially seductive when another politician says, it's not your money, it's somebody else's money. Right? We're going to get it from that pesky 1%. Turns out, though, the 1% runs out of money eventually. It turns out, actually, the top 10% of taxpayers pay 70% of all federal revenue. Top 1% pays about 37%. Is that fair? Are they paying their fair share? I don't know. What's fair? It's a subjective question. It's an ethical question. It strikes me as odd, though, that when we're talking about a Joe Biden tax plan where you're going to end up paying 62% tax rates, it would be hard to convince me that that's ethical. That 60% of your time should be just to pay the government. That seems strange to me. right? No matter how rich you are. It also seems like a good way to ensure that we don't create any more wealth. You can't redistribute what's not there. This really just gets down to a simple thing. Do we stand for things that work and that create prosperity, or do we not? We stand for things that just feel good to say. This is the adult conversation that we have to have as Americans and as policymakers. It's super easy for me to get elected by just promising people stuff. I'll get you this, I'll get you free this, I'll get you free that, I'll get you free this service, that service, I'll build this. At no cost, there's no trade-offs. It's all just there. Utopia. The thing about utopia is it's a Greek word that means no place. It doesn't exist. We'll kill ourselves trying to get there. We have to be reasonable, we have to be honest with the American people, and there's been a lot of politicians that don't do that. Life is about trade-offs. You know this in business, of course, right? You can't just have the solution you want. You know there's trade-offs. Same as with policy making. When we talk about Medicare for all, we talk about free college, they don't like to talk about the trade-offs. When they talk about drug pricing, price controls, HR 3, they say, oh, Republicans are just against it because they just don't want you to have lower drug prices. Yeah, because we're just that evil. Like, we just don't want it. No, of course not. There's trade-offs. Because what it happens to mean is that when you do a price control on something, well, no more of it gets created. You know that. You're in business. You produce things. The government says that you can't sell that thing for the price you want to sell it for. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to produce less of it, or not produce it at all. That's just what happens. That's a basic reality. Same with drugs. You can't argue about the pricing of something if it doesn't exist in the first place. That's just an example. This goes on and on and on with so many different policy issues. I bet a lot of you guys like hiring independent contractors too. Anybody hire independent contractors? Does anybody do independent contracting? Nobody's raising their hand, but I bet you do. Okay. Has anybody ever ridden an Uber? All right. You know that's all illegal in California? It's illegal. It's illegal in California. You can't hire independent contractors anymore. Uber and Lyft threatened to leave, so what they're going to do with this election in California is I think it's like Prop 22, they're voting on as a state to give some carve-out to Uber and Lyft so that they can still have Uber and Lyft. So Uber and Lyft, because they have, they're big, expensive lobbyists and they can petition the government, they can get that voted on. No other business gets it. That's crazy. That's absolutely insane. You know what else is insane? That same exact bill, same exact policy, was passed out of the House of Representatives this year. You never heard about it because the Senate blocked, the Senate never bothered to vote on it, the President would never sign it because it's crazy. To say that you as an American cannot sell your own time and your own labor the way you want to, and as an employer, you can't hire the way you want to, is crazy. It's crazy. What does it result in? What is the benefits of this? Well, according to those who advocate for it, they say, well, it just magically makes all employees have more benefits and access to health care and a more stable job. That's what they say. In reality, even when you know exactly what would happen, you just don't hire the people in the first place. There's just less employment. When there's less employment, well, the wages go down. Wages go down because the job market's no longer competitive. This is what happens. This is obviously what happens. There's trade-offs to everything. This utopianism is dangerous. It's a cliche, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's a cliche, but it's very, very true. And we're really at a tipping point here. All of these policies are dangerous. They're dangerous for our livelihoods. And if we're trying to recover out of a recession, which we're doing a decent job of, better than most people thought. A lot of economists thought we'd be at 20% unemployment. We're not, because we had good fundamentals. A lot of states didn't listen to the detractors and didn't listen to the hair on fire media, the politicians that wanted to scare everybody to death, and they kept our economy open. Texas is one of those, thank God. But other states aren't so lucky, and their unemployment rates are reflective of that. This stuff matters for people's lives, it matters for people's health. There's a lot of cancer screenings being put off a lot of healthcare issues being put off because people have been scared quite literally to death dealing with these issues at home instead of going to the hospital because they're told that the hospitals are overwhelmed. It wasn't true. I don't know if you guys recall, but our Houston hospital system and our CEOs had to come out in a press conference and say, come to the hospital. This was at the height of the pandemic here in Houston. They had to come out and say, come to the hospital. Because people are dying at home because they've been scared by our local politicians who said that we're on the precipice of disaster, our hospitals are overwhelmed, our ACUs are almost at 100% capacity. They throw out this irresponsible language and statistics without any context. So the doctors would say, excuse me, we're always at 100% capacity. That's how you run a hospital, right? And then when we pass that, we just add more beds. That's just how it works. But people wouldn't come in. And then they want to accuse the president or me of harming people because we sought to actually create context with this data. It turns out that their rhetoric directly harms people. This is the truth. This is the absolute truth. And I hope America wakes up to that. And I hope we vote that way. Because there's very stark differences in what happens after November. It's going to be lockdowns, higher taxes, higher regulations, destroying the Texas energy sector. Or not. And I prefer the not. I think we're on our way to recovery, and I think we have a lot to look forward to if we advocate for the stuff that works. And then we voted to do one basic thing, that we want to teach our kids to love this country again, that this is a good place, based on the best ideas that humankind ever had, moral truth from Jerusalem, reason from Athens, jurisprudence and rule of law from Rome, personal property right protection from London, the Magna Carta, this idea that even kings are subject to law. All of these ideas were written down in Philadelphia in 1776, where we said why governments exist, to protect your inalienable rights. And they were written down in 1787 in the Constitution, when we said how we should govern, in the form of a republic. And we created more prosperity than the human race has ever known. More freedom, more equality, and more justice than the world has ever known. Didn't mean we did it perfectly. We screwed it up sometimes. We didn't live up to those ideals. But we've been fighting to live up to those ideals ever since. And to throw it all away, to undercut those foundations, because utopia hasn't been reached, it's no place, would be the worst disservice to America that we could possibly imagine. It would be regressive in the worst possible form. And we really are at that turning point. I do believe that. But I think we have a lot of good days ahead if we continue to be America. That's a pretty important point, and I thank you all for being part of that growth and prosperity. Thank you all so much for having me.
Do we have any questions? Okay, right there.
Great commercial, by the way, John. We hear a lot about the loud, left-wing liberals who like to Nancy Pelosi. You work with a lot of congressmen from across the country. Do you find the same thing from all Democrats? Are they all left-wing liberal men, or you find some of them moving the other way?
For those who can't hear, the question is, what is the spectrum of the Democrats that I deal with? So there's far left versus moderate. Of course, there's a spectrum. You know, there's my friends, even very, very liberal friends. I consider Joe Kennedy to be very liberal. It's somebody that will have a rational conversation with me without any emotion tied to it. That's a good thing. I can at least deal with that. But now he's going away. He's not going to be here next term. Neither is Tulsi Gabbard, another friend who I consider a rational person who loves this country. And so I think my honest problem with so-called moderate Democrats is that they still vote like radicals. These are very radical policies. I gave you guys a couple examples. The H.R. 3, the drug pricing bill, which would eradicate new drug innovation for the next 10 years, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Or the independent contracting issue, it's called the PRO Act. So there's just a couple of examples. There's plenty of other radical ones. So they're very nice people. but you're voting for things that are very, very harmful to the city that you're representing. I don't understand how that's possible. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, this might be rhetorical or funny, not funny, but can we ever get term limits in Congress?
Yeah, I mean, 90% of Americans are in favor of term limits, and I am too. But I do warn people, it's not going to be what you think it is. So I'm definitely in favor. I think probably about 12 years. If I were to choose, I think 12 years in the House, and maybe 18 in the Senate. Maybe also change our terms to 3 years. I wouldn't mind that either, because it's a little silly how often we're running, and you're like, stop running. Your damn campaign commercials. You want to know another crazy policy? Taxpayer-funded campaigns. That was H.R. 1. That's the flagship bill passed out of Pelosi's house last year. H.R. 1. They named it H.R. 1 because it's their favorite bill. Right? So a 6-to-1 match, federal dollars to any low-dollar campaign donation. This would result in millions of extra dollars into my campaign. So your tax dollars going into campaigns you don't support. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, nobody supports that. Yet that's what the Democrats all voted on, passed out of the House. Very strange things. So, that wasn't your question. Here, let me give you the counter arguments though. This is what so if you don't like Nancy Pelosi and you think she should be term limited out, I want you to just imagine for a second who would replace her. Right? And everybody's like, oh. I guarantee you it's going to be younger and crazier. Guaranteed. So it's 100% true. So you just got to be kind of careful what you wish for. It also tends to empower the administrative branch a lot more when they know that we're term limited out. So like I said before, everything has trade-offs. Everything has trade-offs, and it's important to have those discussions about what trade-offs are. I just agree with it because I think the American people just genuinely want it, and maybe it's everything else has term limits. Why not this?
Any others? Congressman, I have one for you. In your book, you talk about when you were 13 years old and your father gave you the book about Navy SEALs and how that cemented your resolve at that point in time. And you prepared from that point in time when you were 13 to be a SEAL. And that's very admirable. So that's your culture. That's the way your mind works. What are you preparing yourself for today for the next 10 years?
I don't know. I appreciate the question, but I never answer it. So, politician. In politics, there is no pipeline the way there is in the military, right? You're preparing to be a SEAL. There's a very specific set of steps that I would engage in. It is not that way in politics. It just depends on the local people. It depends on opportunities that arise. And so I just try to do the best I can for this particular race and the next race and helping this district. And I'm proud of what we've been able to do. And I obviously, I'm in Washington, so we talk about national issues all the time. But throughout the last couple of years, we've mostly focused, when it really comes to the weight of my office, we focused on things here in the district, flooding being the primary one, making sure that Harris County Flood Control District has what it needs, that the Water Resource Development Act is which is passed every 2 years, is properly suited to what we need here, and that these projects that are ongoing and these studies that are ongoing are on track. And so that's been a big one. And then we've had a couple of great successes, whether it's getting the Army Corps of Engineers to re-permit something so that we can de-silt Langham Creek. We're getting FEMA to extend the dredging project at the San Jacinto, making sure that there's funding available for the gates at Lake Houston, getting a study done out here at Cypress Creek, which will end up basically saying that what needs to be done is additional work on the creeks themselves to allow for more water conveyance. So these things are ongoing. I think people should know that. None of it happens as fast as you'd like it to, but I know it's big on everybody's minds. You can't plan for your business if you think you're going to get flooded all the time. And so the whole of government approach is really necessary to that. We focused on clean energy solutions, carbon capture, again, the things that work, supporting the things that work with what my bill called the New Energy Frontier. Talking about natural gas and exporting natural gas, nuclear energy, carbon capture. These things, these technologies that are proven to work, and more importantly, can be exported to the world so that you actually reduce global emissions instead of just harming America for no reason and then letting China do what they want. We've been working on direct primary care enhancement bills, so we just put that out a couple of weeks ago. This is the first step to improving healthcare in America, because all healthcare starts with primary care. Direct primary care is by far the best model to engage in primary care. So it basically is a subscription service. You pay $75 a month, you have total access to a doctor. That's it. No insurance, no copays, no deductibles. Just call your doctor. Now it's not insurance, it's primary care, but that's the first step, right? They quarterback the rest of your health care. Okay? And this is already a thing. I'm not making this up. I'm not making up the $75 number. That's just the average. Your businesses could contract with direct primary care physicians, and then guess what happens? You renegotiate your premiums. So every employee now feels like they have a doctor that they can trust and that they know and that they call, and all your premiums just went down. I'm not making this up. This has already happened across the Houston area. All right? We can improve this by allowing for a few things. So my bill allows HSAs to pay for it. It allows HRAs to pay for it, basically HSAs that your companies have, MRAs to pay for it, and also allows, working in conjunction with Texas policymakers at the state level, allowing Medicaid waivers to engage with direct primary care. So we're enhancing and expanding this entire model. This is the step-by-step approach that we have to take to making healthcare more personalized and more choice-driven. Again, because there's trade-offs, right? We can just promise you free healthcare. That's like one way to do it. There's trade-offs with that, because when we promise you free healthcare, what we're really saying is we're going to reimburse doctors and hospitals at Medicare rates, and we're also going to double and triple your taxes. Okay, those are the trade-offs. Here's the thing about reimbursement rates: when they're that low, it's price controls. So you're just going to have less doctors and less hospitals, and especially less independent clinics. So you have less of everything. You start to look a lot more like Canada and the UK. And I promise you, every Canadian that talks to me about this is not happy with what they have, especially once they realize what there is here. They have access to a fraction of the drugs, they have access to a fraction of the care, and way longer wait times. This matters. These trade-offs matter quite a bit. We do have the best healthcare in the world, by far. But it is too expensive. It's prohibitively expensive for some. So we've got to figure out how to deal with that. This step-by-step process is the right way to do it, and then moving into a more premium support-based model. We can talk about healthcare all day long. These are the kind of things we've been working on. Those are the kind of things that I look to over the next 2 years, really, because my next goal is to get off of budget and homeland and get on energy and commerce. So, because these projects of mine are obviously better suited to the Energy and Commerce Committee. So, that's the long answer to your question. Thank you guys so much. I don't know if we have any more, but appreciate you.
Any more questions? Okay, we want to thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Wait a minute. This thing on? I can hear the echo. It must be on. Congressman, my experience in the past has been that earmarks weren't all that bad. You know, we were able to get things here in Harris County with a particular earmark that was really helpful from time to time. I remember Kay Bailey Hutchinson got an earmark to help us with the ship channel a time or two. And there were others that happened. What's happening up there? I hear there might be a move to go back to allowing those.
Yeah. We're doing a double goodbye now. You know when you say goodbye to somebody and then you like go to the bathroom and they're still there? And you're like, oh, we gotta say goodbye again. That's what's happening right now. It's just kind of fun. Earmark, I agree with that. Again, there's trade-offs, right? This gets to the conversation of trade-offs. And, sometimes Republicans are at fault for this too. Like, it felt really good to say, no more earmarks. Like, look at us, we're so fiscally responsible. And it turns out, earmarks don't really account for a huge amount of the budget by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, it annoys people because it does tend to be very locally focused, and sometimes it goes towards some beekeeping study, and that makes people angry, and I get that. So there's a good argument to be made there. Is that really what federal dollars should ever be spent on? And it's usually this sort of, kind of behind the scenes negotiation, and not every district gets it. So I can argue both sides of this. But to your point, it does allow for a little bit more negotiations to take place, and it does allow for sometimes much needed local projects to take place. And so you can make an argument for maybe getting somewhere in between, where there's just more structure and parameters around what an earmark is allowed to be. A lot of us did think Democrats were bringing back earmarks, and I don't think they were going to get a whole lot of pushback from Republicans on it. I don't know, it never happened. But they got a bad name over time, and a lot of people just get frustrated by it, unless they get theirs in their district. So again, there's trade-offs, right? There's pros and cons to this, but it doesn't appear to me that they're coming back anytime soon. The Democrats weren't going to bring them back. In this last session, I'm not sure I see them doing it in this next session either, but we will see. We will see. All right, now we're saying goodbye? All right. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thanks for being here with us today. We look forward to seeing you in 2021 in person again. Pay attention to the website for our upcoming events. Thank you. Have a good day.